This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Kevin Tucker and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic! What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is November 4th, 2024. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by my co-host, Kevin Tucker. Kevin, what is going on, man? This is going to be a weird week, just in general, for a lot of reasons. But, yeah, it's going to be an interesting week for the Magic as well, as things are not looking super hot right now. How are we doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, I guess. I mean, like, you're right. It is going to be a weird week. And I was really hoping we could go into this week with some positivity on the Magic front, but didn't get that tonight against Dallas. I have to flip the script on you, Jonathan. I have to ask how you're doing. Like, how are you doing right now in the midst of all this?
I think given the circumstances, I'm doing relatively well. It just sucks because let's just jump right into this. When you go into a season with as much excitement and anticipation and hope as we did, and as excited as we were, after the first 5 games, for it to just flip so quickly and go not quite like as bad as it possibly could, but it also doesn't feel like we're like the results have gotten as bad as they possibly could. I think an important thing to remember is no matter how bad the losses are, they only count as one loss.
Right.
But if we didn't live in that vacuum, like these losses are like as bad as they could get. Like some of these losses, like it feels like we're back in like 2021. Mm-hmm. Just like how by halftime you just know the game is already over. Right. And then you're just like blankly staring at your screen. I'm scrolling Twitter during the game, seeing what other people are saying. Like, it sucks, but we'll talk about it. But I'm still optimistic that they're going to be able to turn things around to a certain degree. They're not going to get back to the level that they would be playing if everyone was healthy, but I also don't think it's going to be as bad as it has been for too much longer, and we'll get into all of that. What about you?
I hope you're right. What about me? Yeah, I'm all right. Like you said, it's a weird week. I fear that we're going to go from one dumpster fire to the next when we go from the Magic to Tuesday night, just chaos and mess everywhere, no matter where you look.
Yeah.
If you're a Magic fan. But I mean, yeah, tonight was really demoralizing, right? Like, you start really well, obviously, and we'll talk more specifically about the game in a second. But like for me personally, like it's like, man, we're in a tough spot, and more than anything, I just feel bad for the guys. Like I feel bad for the players that are healthy enough to try to fight through this, and they're just incapable right now of competing. Like not even like if you lose in Dallas, it's whatever, right? Obviously, under the current circumstances, that's a better team than you, more talented. Luka is outrageous. You expect to lose that game, likely on paper, but to not even be competitive by halftime, that's the part that's just got to be demoralizing for them. So I feel bad for them. But yeah, I'm okay. Obviously, it's a long season. I'm trying to keep my eye on that. But right now it hurts. Definitely hurts. 3-game losing streak. You're under 500 for the first time since the end of the 22-23 season. Like you've mentioned many times on the show, Magic never dropped under 500 last year. So it's weird to be there, but kind of is what it is. And we'll take it one game at a time.
And like they got pretty close. So it's not like, the Magic were never close to being right under 500. Like they flirted with it pretty heavily.
They were
last
500
January.
Several times. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not that we're saying like, it's such a big difference from one season to the next. Obviously, the Magic dealt with injuries at the beginning of last season, but the injury that we're dealing with now is just more significant really than this team can overcome. Like we don't have a guy that can step in and give you Paolo production or something similar to that. You really have to. You've seen Moneyball, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like, hey, we can't replace Jason Giambi with one player, but we can replicate him in the aggregate, right?
Exactly.
I don't know that we can replicate Paolo Banchero in the aggregate.
No.
Like that's really the biggest problem with this team so far. And we're going to talk specifically about the last couple of games. We're not going to take a ton of time to talk about those losses. I don't want to say they're the kind of games that you watch the tape once you burn it and then you move on, because there are real significant issues that we're dealing with, but I don't know how productive it's going to be to sit and dwell on these games and what went wrong when we could spend that time talking about potentially how the Magic can right the ship a little bit and improve moving forward. But before we get to that, do want to remind you all about our first group night of the season that is coming up in just about 6 weeks on December 19th when the Magic take on Oklahoma City at home. That game is going to be on TNT. That's going to be our second nationally televised game of the year, the first at home. That game tips off at 7 o'clock, and we are going to be sitting in sections 101 and 102 near the Oklahoma City bench, trying to make an impact and change the atmosphere of that game. So if you are a diehard Orlando Magic fan and you want to be at that game, you want to sit around other diehard Magic fans and scream and chant and cheer the entire night, we invite you to join us on that night. And the first 100 tickets that are purchased to this game will also be able to go down, to the lower bowl area and watch pregame warmups with us before that game. I think the last I checked earlier this evening, there are only about 10 or 15 tickets left for that first 100. So if you're interested in being a part of that experience at all, I would urge you right now to go to FEVO, which is FEVO, FEVO-enterprise.com/event/sixthman65/offer. That's FEVO-enterprise.com/event/sixthman65/offer. Again, only about 10 or 15 tickets left in that first 100 as we're recording this Sunday night. So if you're listening to this Sunday morning, those tickets might be sold out or there are probably only a few left. So we really are looking forward to making that a fun night for Magic fans and change the atmosphere in Kia Center for that night, that game that's going to be on TNT. So be sure to get your tickets to that event because they are going fast and that's going to be a great time. And we're hoping that Paolo Banchero can be back. I just keep thinking about getting the notification earlier that day, early in the afternoon, that Paolo Banchero is set to make his return on national television to the Orlando Magic and just injecting this energy into the team, into the fan base, and us just having this runaway victory against the Oklahoma City Thunder on TNT. We can't promise that that's going to happen, but that is what we're hoping for right now, so hope that you all will join us that night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to go ahead and right now, as we're talking, I'm pinning this tweet on our Twitter. So if you're looking for that link, like you said, we'll put it in the description, but also put it on Twitter there. So yeah, definitely come. It was so much fun last year, like so much fun. It's great to meet a lot of, viewers and listeners in person. Sometimes we see your names in the comments and in the chat and wherever else. And so to get to like put faces to names, like we love that more than anything. So yeah, definitely come join us. And yeah, hopefully Paolo or not, let's get a W against OKC.
And just, I wanted to mention, we did end up postponing the watch party that we had Friday night. If you've been paying attention to, what's been going on, in Orlando, especially the night of Halloween, I'm sure you understand why we did that. We don't have any update on another date, but as soon as we have that, just be on the lookout for that. We're trying to reschedule that, and so we don't lose one of those watch parties. But we try to put that messaging out on social media that day. So if anybody did end up showing up to Wall Street expecting a watch party, we apologize. Try to get that news out as quickly as we could. So if you didn't see that, maybe you're not following us on social media, but this is your cue to follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Six Man Show. It's the best place to follow us for updates for events if we need to postpone something, and obviously all of our coverage and all the things that we post to social media. So be sure to follow us there. And hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, roughly like half the people that watch us on YouTube are actually not subscribed to the channel. So a big way to help us is to just go ahead, like this video, subscribe, ring the little notification bell. You get a notification anytime we upload a new video. And it helps out the channel, helps out the algorithm, all that kind of stuff. So please go ahead and throw us a sub if you're watching this on YouTube. Kevin, let's go back, talk a little bit about Friday's game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, we knew night before was not going to be any Paolo Banchero in that game, and we were hoping that we would have Wendell Carter Jr. and Goga Batadze. Neither of those guys were able to suit up in that game. So that starting unit looked like Franz Wagner, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Anthony Black, Jalen Suggs, and Mo Wagner. So Anthony Black and Mo Wagner both getting promoted to the starting lineup for this one. It was a pretty interesting decision in my opinion. I thought that maybe we'd see Jonathan Isaac elevated to that, especially given the matchup with the Cleveland Cavaliers when it comes to Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. That absolutely proved to be a factor in this game. I don't really know quite what the thought process was. Maybe it's the fact that Jonathan Isaac hasn't been able to log a ton of minutes so far. But what were your thoughts on that starting lineup? And we could talk about some of the issues, particularly for this matchup with that starting unit.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. We talked about it on our emergency podcast after the Paolo injury about that starting unit and potentially JI starting, but the minutes thing is just that. I think that was the difference. He ends up playing 16 minutes on Friday against Cleveland versus Anthony Black or Mo Wagner both played 27 minutes, and so obviously we have not seen JI play 27 minutes. I don't even know, did he hit 27 minutes in the playoff series? I don't know. That's a lot. And so I think that's ultimately the reason why. As for the other guys, I think if Goga's healthy, I think he probably starts there. But you lose him. He was questionable going into the game again, like he was tonight. And so there's a little bit of a question mark whether he's going to be available. And then you find out, later in the day that he's not. So
you're kind of seen him since the Memphis game now.
Right. And you're kind of forced to play Mo Wagner. Once that happens, Mo's got to start. And then who do you put next to him? They end up deciding Anthony Black. At that point, if you decide you're not going to start JI and Goga's not available, Wendell's not available, at that point, just flip a coin. I don't really care who, I don't really fault Jamal Mosley for picking Anthony Black. But that was interesting. And yeah, obviously wish JI would have been more available. But yeah, it was tough from the start without those bigs. I mean, you pick just about any other team in the league and you feel maybe a little bit better, but those two bigs that they have, I mean, what are you going to do with just Mo Wagner out there, right? I don't know. The Magic were putting it, and Jamal Mosley in particular was put in an impossible position, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we also ran into that tonight. We've played a few teams now who are able to match up, maybe not perfectly with the Magic size, but definitely better than some other teams. Indiana ran some lineups that were pretty big. Talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight. We struggled a lot with Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, the athletic bigs of the Dallas Mavericks. Now, when your only center on the team is, people are talking about JI. To me, JI is not a 5. We've tried to play JI at the 5 at times, right, but he's still very much learning how to play that position. So when Mo Wagner is really your only true center on the roster, asking him to be able to match up with those types of guys more often than not, it's not going to end well. And I did feel like the first few minutes of that Cleveland game, we came out with the right level of energy, the right level of focus. When you have a guy like Donovan Mitchell, who early, I think he scored the first 7 points or something like that for Cleveland, just wasn't really going well. The Magic give up yet another 34-point quarter, only scoring 16 in that first. When you're down by 18 after the first quarter, when you do not have a guy like Paolo Banchero, it is the uphill of all uphill battles. Magic found themselves trailing at the half 63-44, so down by 19. And then you have a pretty spirited effort in that third quarter where I think they cut the lead to 10 or to 8, and then Cleveland immediately goes on a run, and you're down, I think it was 15 or 16 going into that fourth quarter, and you're never really able to make this much of a game going into that fourth. For me, we talk about guys that needed to step up in this game, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, those guys in particular. Jalen Suggs did step up in this game. He had 28 points, 10 of 20 on 1 of 7 from behind the arc. Usually, if I were to tell you, hey, Jalen scored 28 in this game, you figure he hits 5 or 6 threes in that game. But 7 of 8 at the free throw line, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals. Flirted with a triple-double, did Jalen Suggs to go along with the 28 points. And then Franz was okay. It felt like he was still trying to rid himself of those effects of whatever illness that he was dealing with earlier in the week. 17 points, 8 of 19 from the floor. really the only other bright spot for me in this game was Tristan da Silva, who comes in and has a really strong second half. He has 17 points in this game, 6 of 8 from the floor, 3 of 3 from behind the arc, 5 rebounds, 2 assists in 20 minutes. You come away from that game, like, I think people sort of, we'll talk about this. Tristan started tonight against Dallas. People saw the 17 points that he had against Cleveland and I think got their hopes up a little bit too high going into this Dallas game. Like, he was probably never going to be able to replicate that, and he didn't. We'll talk about that. But this, for me, was like really a case of this team in their first game without Paolo. They're trying to pull together. It's definitely an emotional win. They're doing their best, right? Really, since news had broke that he was going to be out for a significant amount of time, and they fought hard, but just such a bad matchup with Cleveland. Like, this team is trying to get to the rim, but when it's Jarrett Allen, it's Evan Mobley down there waiting for you. It's hard to stay in attack mode. And then they did, especially in that second half, started to settle for threes. You're 11 for 33 from behind the arc in that game. And yeah, I mean, Cleveland, to their credit, were really hot shooting from behind the arc, especially in that first half. They end up 15 of 38 from behind the arc. They shoot 50% from the floor in the game. You have 14 turnovers. Just bad matchup, and like, this team can't really afford at this point to run into a bad matchup or to have a bad shooting night like they did. Without Paolo, the offense basically has to be perfect to have a chance against a high-powered offense like the Cleveland Cavaliers, who at this point have been the most efficient offense in the league, and they're also undefeated.
Yeah, and there's a trend that was in this game. You touched on it briefly. That I feel like I don't have the data to back it up, but I feel like we've seen this a couple other times already this season, and maybe a few times last year. And it was the Magic, both in the second and the third quarter, we went on a great run and got to within 10 with a couple minutes left, right? In the second quarter, it was with 4:17 left in the second quarter. They get it down to 10, 48-38. And then to close the second quarter, Cleveland goes on a big run to end up with a 19-point lead. So over those last 4 minutes, they outscore you by 9. They lead by 19 at the half. Third quarter, again, Magic down by as many as 22, I think, early in the third quarter. They come all the way back to within 10 with 2:42 left in the third quarter. 81-71. By the end of the third quarter, it's 95-78. They outscore you by 7 over the last 2:42. So that's twice in one game that we've seen that. And again, something like that, I don't know how much of that is like physical, like we worked our tails off for this long stretch in this quarter to come back and get within striking distance, and then we just run out of gas. I don't know how much of it is mental, as in, we're clicking, we're comfortable, and then the other team hits back, or some combination of the two. I don't know, but to see that happen twice in the game was a little bit, I don't even know if frustrating is the right word, because on the one hand, I'm very sympathetic for everyone who's wearing that jersey right now, right? I get it. But then again, I feel like it's a trend we've seen several other times in this iteration of the Magic. So that was another thing that stood out for me in this game was they tried. They gave their best effort, got somewhat close within 10 on 2 occasions, but ultimately the Cavs just pulled away, as they should with the team that they have. Jonathan, it's time for the return of one of our favorite segments. This was a tough week, Jonathan. The Magic had like 3 dunks all week. It was a rough week, but one of them was very special, part of a very special 50-point performance for Paolo. It's this week's Jam Hot Chicken Jam of the Week, and it comes courtesy of that Monday night performance against Indiana. Paolo Banchero bringing the ball up against, first it's Obi Toppin. He gets a screen from Mo Wagner, takes Isaiah Jackson to the rim, a little shoulder shove, and the 2-hand throwdown. It was filthy. It was a part of that beautiful first quarter where I think he had 19 points in that first quarter, but it was an awesome dunk and an awesome night for Paolo. And by far and away, this week's Jam Hot Chicken Jam of the Week. Reminder that Jam Hot Chicken is bringing jams, culture, and hot chicken to the heart of Winter Park. They're an LA and Nashville-inspired hot chicken shack, and they're locally owned and operated. They're at 400 West New England Avenue, Suite 13 in Hannibal Square. They're in beautiful Winter Park. You can follow them at Jam Hot Chicken on all social media, and check out jamhotchickenfl.com to check out their menu and online ordering and all those cool things. We're big fans of Jam Hot Chicken because they're big fans of you. They love the Orlando Magic. They love the fan community, and that's why we partner with them again for this season. So definitely go check them out at Winter Park And when you do, just let them know that the Six Man Show sent you.
This episode is also brought to you by Dylan Holden, Gotham Grails, Keith Wallace, Bill Fulton, and Bruv Sal. Those are some of our Hall of Fame and Elite Tier patrons. Some of the folks who went over to patreon.com/the Six Man Show, selected either the Hall of Fame or Elite Tier to help financially support the Six Man Show. Each and every episode, we shout out some of our Hall of Fame and Elite Tier patrons. We also shout out brand new patrons whenever we have them. So this episode, a big shout out to Kai, who joined our All-Star tier this week. Again, our patrons are the folks that help financially support the Six Man Show, help make each and every episode possible. If you enjoy our content and you want us to be able to continue to put out this content, we would encourage you to head over to patreon.com/the Six Man Show and find whichever tier you find is best, for you. Every little bit helps, allows us to do what we do. We can't do it without you guys, and we appreciate it. We love you guys, and we're so grateful that we get to do this on basically almost a daily basis these days, especially with the season started. So again, so grateful to all of our patrons. And if you appreciate the show and enjoy what we do and want to help support what we do so that we can do it more and better and forever, find us again over at patreon.com/the Six Man Show. Let's get back to the episode. I think a lot of pretty much everyone on the roster, at this point, maybe there's one guy that you could make an argue for. A lot, like, guys are just struggling with being inconsistent, and that's not only happening from game to game, but that's coming like in the flow of games where guys are just have been really streaky shooting the ball, and we've seen it in multiple games now where like the offense starts to stall, and then the energy and the focus on the defensive end, is really affected as well. And to me, that's one of the most frustrating things, and has been one of the most frustrating things about this team over the course of the last couple of seasons, is every single practice, every single post-game availability, every single pre-game availability, at media day, every halftime interview, every post-game interview, we talk about how this team has to hang their hat on the defensive end of the floor. And it's just like, even when we have enough evidence over the course of the last couple of years that if this team defends at a high level, it almost doesn't matter what they're doing offensively. If they play to their potential and their capabilities defensively for 48 or close to 48 minutes, at the end of the game, they are going to have a chance. And I get it. I've played basketball, when like shots are not going in, like it's hard to stay motivated on that other end. When shots are going in, or shots are not going in, it's hard to keep that level of frustration from like creeping up on you. And when shots are not going in, like basketball just isn't really as fun. So it's hard to stay focused when you're not able to make shots, especially when this team is generating good looks. And especially in this game against Dallas, they were generating good looks. They're not going in. So I do understand that. But it's like, man, like if you guys can just remember how good you can be defensively, and we have seen it where I go back to what was it? The fourth quarter last year, like in Minnesota, where this team just decided like, hey, for 7 minutes, you all are just not going to score, and we're able to close out a game like that. Last year, the second quarter of the last game of the regular season against Milwaukee, where Jonathan Isaac checks in, it's like, hey, you guys are just literally not going to score while this guy's on the floor. Like, when this team does that, even if they can't score, like they are going to have a chance against anybody. So when we haven't really seen that this year, like we haven't seen that for a full 48 minutes or even close to a full 48 minutes. We saw it for 24 minutes, against Miami. We've seen it for, 10 or 12 minutes in some of these other games. But for whatever reason, like, and this isn't a knock on Paolo whatsoever, but you would think, inserting, whoever, a guy like Tristan da Silva, who at this point, can he guard some of the same guys as Paolo? No, Paolo's 6'10", 250 pounds. But just like fundamentally, you would consider Tristan da Silva a better defender than Paolo Banchero, right? Like, I don't know that many people that would disagree with that. So you would think like this team has the potential to maybe even be a little step above like what they are normally defensively. And we're going to talk about this. This team is only, eighth in, defensive efficiency so far in the year. And it's we're 7 games in. One game can really skew the sample size and skew the data right now. But to me, that's been a frustrating trend with the Magic so far, is that like we haven't seen them just like come out and be totally locked in, like from the opening tip in any of these games. When they have been really good defensively, for the most part, it's either come when they're down a lot or it's come in the second half where they decide to go on a run.
Yeah, and again, like you said, that's the identity of this team, and so that's got to come first, no matter who's on the floor. Like whether it's Paolo, whether he's gone, whether it's Franz, whoever, doesn't matter. The five, that's the identity of this team. Now, when the Magic are having to shift around so many different guys, again, I give them a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt because they're sharing the floor with guys right now that they haven't done yet. Not just because, we're having to move things around, but, we're 7 games into a season, training camp, they had their set, different teams that they were playing with. And so like a lot of guys are figuring it out. Now, some of the guys have been playing with each other for years and you get that, but because we've added Anthony Black, who didn't play a ton last year, Jet Howard, Tristan da Silva, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, that's 4 guys out there who right now are actually playing meaningful minutes who haven't played with the rest of the guys. And so again, I give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there. But at the end of the day, that is the identity of this team. And it's the only thing that kept us in a lot of games last year, right? Like obviously last year, Magic, horrible offensive team. It was our defense that kept us in games and won us a lot of games. And so I think that's still definitely possible. We'll over the course of this, we're going to try to pick out some silver linings as we kind of break this down. One of the silver linings for me is that this stretch right now is happening in what is already a very difficult stretch. Like even with Paolo, let's say you're fully healthy, Wendell, Paolo, Goga, everybody, Franz isn't sick. This is a tough stretch of games, this 5-game road trip. We said it was very difficult, especially because the Cavs started way better than expected. And OKC, even though we knew they'd be really good, they've started better than expected. Now, we haven't played the OKC game yet, so we might win that game. Who knows? But on paper, this is a very difficult stretch. And so my silver lining, that we're talking about, at least right now, is that at least this happened in what was already a very difficult stretch, right? Because if this happened in this homestand, let's say Paolo got injured right before this homestand that's coming up, where you got Washington and whoever else, I forget, Charlotte, this homestand that's coming up of teams that are lower tier, and the Magic had to try to figure it out then, that could have been really bad. Dropping games that you needed to win. These games are already going to be tough. So I'm trying to find a silver lining. That's one of them that I'm going to pick out, at least for now.
I think there's a chance that even with Paolo, your record is still 3-4 right now. Like
absolutely.
I would say probably not. Like, maybe you're 4-3, maybe you're 5-2, but like, is it outside the realm of possibilities that the Magic lose another close game in Cleveland to the Cavaliers? Like, no, obviously, that's like super possible. Dallas, yeah, like going into Dallas against a very high powered offense, Luka, Kyrie, Klay Thompson, like, yeah, like that is the silver lining for me, is that, again, yes, these are bad losses, but they're just still one loss, right? And in a game that you very well could have lost, even if Paolo was completely healthy. And like, yeah, there are winnable games that are coming up on the schedule. Maybe we can take a look at that, a little bit later. But and the Magic, who knows? They might go into Oklahoma City and win the game. Like, that's just over the course of the last 12, 13 years, when you least expect the Magic to get a win, usually that's when they get a win. So stranger things have happened, So we'll keep an eye on that. But let's talk a little bit about this Dallas game. The Cleveland game felt more of like a matchup issue. This game for me was like, we really have no idea what we're doing, offensively. Like at this point, like, yes, we're generating good looks, but it's like we don't really know what our offensive identity is at this point. And you get out to an 18-14 lead, and almost immediately Dallas went on, I believe it was like a 26-8 run. And from that point, and then like Luka starts getting hot, he hit a few shots in a row, and then you're down by 25 at halftime. And you're looking at this box score and you're like, there's just no, like, the points aren't coming from anywhere tonight. Nobody had it going offensively. Jalen is 4 of 13 from the floor. Franz is 6 of 15. Mo is 3 of 10. Jet is 4 of 12. J.I. is 1 of 6. Tristan is 2 of 7. He gets put into the starting lineup. Kenny is 2 of 6. Wendell plays 9 minutes. He's 2 of 5. Like, there was no offense in this game. They and again, I didn't hate the process. Like, they were generating good looks, but like this team, they're going to continue to struggle until like a lot of times it was all right. We're going to give Paolo the ball, and Paolo might just force something here because he's that good, and we're all going to sort of play off of him and stand around and watch. It's almost like let's talk about Franz. Franz has to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Franz is the max guy. We talked about like this is his opportunity really to step up in a significant way. I know he's coming off of being sick and all of that, but here are his last two games without Paolo. 8 of 19 from the floor for 17 points and 6 of 15 from the floor for 13 points. He's 1 of 4 from behind the arc. One of no free throws tonight, which is just not good enough. 25 minutes. I know he's a finesse guy, doesn't get to the free throw line a lot. He's got to like go a little bit Paolo, just put his head down, throw his shoulder into you, draw contact, and get to the free throw line. We need more possessions like that. That's going to help him get some easy buckets, get the confidence going. And then Jalen was able to put this team on his back against Cleveland, 28 points, 10 of 20. Didn't really get it going tonight. 10 points again, 4 of 13 from the floor. Like Jalen, we need Jalen to be better than he was tonight. But like we've seen Franz put up, 36, 38 point games before. We know he's capable of that. He has to be the guy to put the team on his back. Yes, Jalen also got the extension, but like Franz is a max guy. And I'm giving him a pass for, the last, 3 or 4 games prior to the last 2 because of the illness, whatever he's been dealing with. But like at some point, he's just got to shake that and he's got to be way better.
100%. I'm going to piggyback off that. I'm going to give him a pass Monday night too against OKC because they were saying Friday against Cleveland, he still wasn't 100%. So let's say he was still sick Friday. I'll give him Friday. I'll give him tonight. I'll give him Monday OKC. Wednesday against Indy, I got to see something from Franz. Have to. You get that day off. You're not even American. You're not going to worry about the election, right? Like
he's very into politics.
I'm just kidding. That was the joke. Yeah, he is very into politics. Yeah.
Listen, I would be very interested to get his take. He's only been in the States, a handful of years.
Right.
But yeah.
But he should get some.
When we saw that, I was like, Franz is really, like, is he into German politics? Is he into American politics?
Who
like,
knows?
super interesting.
He should get some nice rest Tuesday night and get ready for that game Wednesday against Indiana. It's tough because, obviously you talk about the max thing and all that stuff, but his role over the last 2 seasons has been second fiddle to Paolo. And so on the one hand, it's probably difficult to instantly take over that. But on the other hand, there are plenty of possessions, even when Paolo's on the floor, when Franz takes over. Like he even, earlier in the season, like the first 3 games when Paolo was around, Franz played great basketball, even with Paolo next to him. And so I
don't want to give him that out. Like, and I'm not saying you are, but like a lot of people were having the conversation the last 2 years of like, who's better, Franz or Paolo? Like, who's 1A, 1B? And it's like, oh, well, just because like Paolo had a 50-point game and, like Franz has got a max contract. Now we're like, oh, well, now he's second fiddle. Like, no, not that long ago, we were arguing like this guy might be better than Paolo. Who knows? Well, now, I think we know that that's not true, but like, man, we need more.
Well, here's what I was getting at, though, is like, even if that is the case, Paolo's not there right now. You have to take over. I'd rather see him, if he's going to shoot the ball poorly, whatever, I'd rather see him take 20, 25 shots. Given the current state of this team, he doesn't need to be taking 15 shots. Now, the shot diet is one thing. He had a couple looks at the rim tonight that you'd expect him to finish, that just roll. And by the way, I mean, that was just wacky that him, Mo, Jalen had one. There were a couple other guys. These buckets at these shots at the rim, they're just rolling right off the rim, which is very frustrating.
Had one.
Very frustrating. But anyway, Franz has to be more assertive, has to take over. Again, even if he shoots 5 of 25, right? I still rather him take 25 shots than what we saw tonight. And what you said about the free throws, 100%. He doesn't get to the line a lot, but he's capable of getting to the line when he wants to. Like, we've seen him do that. And so that was more disappointing to me tonight than just the stats, just the 13 points. Like, yeah, that sucks. But just the fact that there was not a single moment tonight where I was like, okay, Franz is going to take over at least for a few minutes and try to will something to happen. The fact that we saw it 0 times in 25 minutes, that's the part that bothered me the most.
Tonight, it didn't feel like they were forcing things. Like I said, like they were getting good shots.
Right.
But if you didn't watch this game, just to give you some more context, the Magic were 31 of 93. They shot 33% from the floor, 8 of 41 from behind the arc, which is 19.5%. Like, that is just absolutely brutal. Like, if we go behind the arc, Tristan 1 of 4, Franz 1 of 2, Wendell 0 of 2, KCP 2 of 6, Jalen 1 of 5, JI 0 of 4, Mo 0 of 4, Jet 2 of 8, Gary 0 for 3, Cole 1 for 2, Corey Joseph 0 for 1. Like, and again, like guys were getting good looks, they're just not going in. And, you know, I do tend to lean like process over results. Like, you know, if you're getting good shots, like, you know, it's just like, hey, sometimes they don't go in. But on the other hand, it's like, this is a performance and results based business. Like, who cares how good your process is if you're just not getting results, like flat out not getting results, like it's not good enough. So that's why I look to Franz. I look to Kentavious Caldwell Pope. People are like, oh my gosh, such a mistake that we signed this guy, like so on and so forth. As a reminder, we go back to October, November of the 2022-2023 season. Gary was terrible. I think at some point, like earlier in that year, he was shooting like 31% from behind the arc, and then ended up being so good from like December on, he ended up at like 40% for the year. And I think KCP is at this point is a better shooter than, you know, Gary was at that time and just overall. So I think KCP is going to break out of it, but man, do we need him to break out of it. The thing that he has going for himself is that he's just still so good defensively. You know, you're able to still play him because he is so good defensively. But man, if that dude doesn't need to start knocking down shots, I don't know what to make of it. Like this game, you know, it's 0 for 4. But like we need more offensively from JI than him just like sitting in the corner, you know, and jacking up corner threes. You know, there was a point in time where we felt like JI was adding a bit more to his game. Like I go back to like the Denver game in the bubble, you know, where he's like taking guys off the dribble, he's getting to the rim, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how much of an impact, like, you know, he says he added 30 pounds over the summer. To me, he looks bigger, but he doesn't look like 30 pounds bigger, right? Like 30 pounds is like a significant amount of weight to add. But I don't know what it is, but he doesn't look to be like quite as spry as I felt he looked a year ago. Now, small sample size, you know, he's missed some time, still working on the conditioning. I don't want to look too much into that, but it's not great. Mo Wagner was bad in this game. He's bad defensively. He's bad offensively. Like had some looks that a lot of times he gets to drop, but like you said, just sort of like rolled out of the rim. Jett Howard, it was good to see him a little bit more confident and like more decisive and getting into his shots, but 4 of 12, 2 of 8 from behind the arc. That's what he's out there to do. If he's not giving you that, wasn't great all the time tonight defensively, but like I'm chalking this up to basically be like Jett Howard's rookie year, and he needs the opportunity to go out there and he needs the leash and the confidence to make mistakes that every time he messes up, he's not going to be yanked off the floor immediately. And to Jamal Mosley's credit, he didn't yank him immediately and let him play through some of those mistakes. But like it's just like, I mean, we talked about this through the, you know, first, you know, what was it, 4 or 5 games with Paolo before the injury. It's like, yeah, some guys looked great. Like a lot of guys looked great in that Miami game. But since then, like it felt like it's mainly been Paolo. Maybe a little bit of Jalen Suggs in there. Like that's the one guy that I was talking about maybe giving a pass when it comes to the consistency, because out of the guys that are on the roster and are currently healthy, to me, Jalen has been the most consistent guy. And he hasn't been incredibly consistent. So, like, guys just have to be better, or the offense can get better, and I do think it will get better as they figure out, like, adjusting to life without Paolo in the interim. But if it doesn't, like, the season might be gone by the time Paolo is back.
So you went through that list, And there's a name that I don't think I heard. Maybe I was distracted. I'm doing a couple of things here. Did you mention Gary?
Oh, because Gary's been horrible since the first game.
He hasn't made a 3 since Miami. Yeah. He's 0 for 10 combined over he didn't take one against Memphis, but Indiana, Chicago, Cleveland, Dallas, 0 for 3, 0 for 2, 0 for 2, 0 for 3. 0 for 10 combined over those 4 games. Like, you gotta hit one. It's the same thing I said with Franz in preseason when he went 0 for 8, 0 for 7, whatever it was. If you're wide open over that many shots, you gotta hit one of them. You gotta hit one of them, especially a guy like Gary, who we know is a great 3-point shooter. We saw it the opening freaking night. He fooled us all. Opening night, man. No, just kidding.
There's a lot of apologies that have were issued that night and have since been redacted.
They've been rescinded. Yeah. So I mean, Gary's got it. He's got to knock down his threes, and I know he will. I believe he will, but he's just got to do it. But I think part of that is also like it's a symptom of whatever this whole thing. Like the fact that Gary Harris and KCP aren't hitting wide open threes. Like what is that? Like, is it just the magic illness? Like, I don't mean the actual sickness.
You get in the building, you put the pinstripes on, and you just can't shoot anymore.
It's crazy. I don't know what the deal is. It's messed up, but it's just our reality, and it's been our reality for a really long time. Going back to just everybody stepping up, Jonathan, you and I said this right before we hit record. We are a 50-point Paolo performance away. Like, if that doesn't happen on Monday, this team is in the midst of a 5-game losing streak instead of a 3-game losing streak. And this team is 2-5 instead of whatever the heck we are, 3-4, right? And I could even like stretch. This is a little bit more of a stretch. I could argue that if you're playing against maybe 20 different NBA teams on that Friday against Brooklyn, you could have lost that game too because you didn't play that well, right? And so you're those two things away from being 1-6 right now. It is concerning. I think that's part of why Magic fans are so concerned, because the team wasn't playing necessarily the best with Paolo, and now that Paolo's gone, it's feeling hopeless. But this team has to learn how to win without Paolo. They have to. And I think if the Magic can figure something out over these next few games to where they can be competitive in games without Paolo, I think in the long term, it's going to help this team out. I really do. But right now, it just feels hopeless. I mean, you said it. They shot 19% from 3 tonight. Like, what is that? Like, this is 2024. Like, that feels hopeless. Again, it's one night. We're not going to worry too much about one night, but they've got to get something figured out.
Well, apart from shots falling, now there is another, like, arguably bigger issue with this team, and it's the fact that we don't have a healthy starting caliber center on the roster, right? Yeah. Like, Wendell Carter Jr. Comes into this game with the right knee tendonitis, missed the last game, was questionable, was basically like a game time decision, essentially, and then plays 9 minutes, is like hobbling around, can't move. I'm like, man, the knee must be really bad. This is not good. And then he's ruled out in the second half, and we find out that it's the left plantar fascia strain that he's been dealing with. And we were talking about on the last pod, like, oh, it's the right knee tendonitis, and then in the past he's dealt with the plantar fasciitis. Well, guess what? Here it is back. Like, this is why so many people wanted the Magic to go out and like, not just get another center, but like upgrade over Wendell. So Wendell is not the center that you're relying on to start, 60, 70 games or whatever, because unfortunately, and it sucks, like, he has just, like, the track record has proven that he is not going to be able to hold up over the course of the season. This is the second straight year where here we are 2 weeks into the season, and now we're having, like, big question marks about the availability of Wendell Carter. The plantar fascia and the right knee tendonitis aren't things that go away by playing through them. Like, the only treatment for those is not playing,
right?
And getting treatment and all of that kind of stuff. So,
and now, let me just add, those aren't like, oh, the bone just has to heal thing, right? It's not like that kind of injury. Like, these are injuries that can recur over and over. I mean, we've seen it, right? Like, this is something that can just flare up at a moment's notice. Friday night, he was supposed to start, and then the tendonitis shows up, and it's all those things and the unpredictability of it all. I think, you're right.
Named in the starting lineup, and then, like, right before tip-off, it's like, oh, he's out.
Right.
Like, and, I'm not going to make this the Jay Huff thing, right? I don't want to keep doing that. I don't want to keep bringing up Jay Huff. But it's like people were, and there people make fair points, when we're having these conversations, in social media that like, hey, maybe Jay Huff didn't want to be here because he figured he was going to be a two-way behind three other established centers on the roster, and maybe he and his representatives figured that probably good for you to go somewhere else. But my thing is like, well, how did he know that he was going to be able to go somewhere else and get a two-way when this guy basically had a training camp in Summer League invite? If you saw him doing anything remotely what he's been able to do in Summer League and now what he's been doing for the Grizzlies, like, I am not letting that dude out of the building. Like, if you have a guarantee, like, hey, we're going to give you a guaranteed two-way spot here in Orlando, even before we get to Summer League or whatever, like, if we just couldn't find a way to make that done, like, get that done, I'm not saying it's all on Jeff Weltman or whatever, but, like, that is a big miss that we weren't able to secure that dude and keep him here, and keep coming back to the fact that we have this open two-way spot that who knows what we're going to do with. Goga is now dealing with this foot tendon strain. Who knows what the tendon is, how serious or whatever. Like, Jamal Mosley was asked about it tonight after the game by Jason Beatty, and basically he said, like, we'll see what happens tomorrow with Goga. And at this point, like, I don't know what two-way guy might be out there that you could make a move for to bring him in. Or, Cole Anthony, he looked okay tonight, but is basically, been out of the rotation at this point. You've got a guy like Caleb Houston who, maybe you can talk somebody else into this guy coming off the bench, being a good shooter. Maybe he needs a change of scenery, is on a really cheap deal. Do you make a deal for an underutilized, undervalued center around the league like you did when Goga Batadze was waived by the Pacers and you went out and got him and sort of turned him into a reclamation project and is very valuable to this team, especially in instances like this? But like, hey, if Goga isn't going to be back and you don't know when he's going to be back, I don't think you can, the season isn't over, the sky isn't falling, but at this point in the season, I genuinely don't think you can afford to start Mo Wagner on a night in and night out basis. Like, if you're not going to have Goga and you don't have a reasonable expectation that he's going to be back soon, I would not be against the Magic. Even if it's going out and getting a guy, that's in the G League right now who can come in and just like defend and rebound, for 10 or 15 minutes a night that you can give a two-way spot to. Because, like, I was a fan of the Wendell Carter, the extension that he signed a few weeks ago. And some people were like, hey, this is a bad idea. And I was like, I don't know. Like, if he can give us what he gave us last year at the bare minimum, like, we'll sort of be fine. But now it's like, who knows what he's going to be able to give you? Like, it kind of seems like maybe that extension was premature.
Well, that's the thing. Like with Wendell, it's at least for me, and reading between the lines sounds like for you, it's never a question of like talent, ability types of things. Like I think especially we saw it in the beginning of this season, right? Like the first 3-4 games, whatever it was, double-digit rebounds, looking super agile, super athletic, better than last year physically. And so it's not a question of talent or ability or fit within the team and all those things. It's just a question of durability. We talked the last episode, the Paolo emergency injury episode, like, do the Magic make a deal to try and fortify or backfill the Paolo situation? That was obviously a stretch. We're just kind of thinking through things. This feels way more realistic to me, like going out and trading for a more capable center that you can rely on night in and night out. The complications with that there are several guys on this team that can't be traded because of contract signed or extension signed or whatever. They can't be traded right now, I should say, right? And so that kind of limits who you're able to deal. But I think it's definitely possible. And I think we'll know pretty quickly. Obviously, Magic play tomorrow. Today, as you're listening to this, we'll know pretty quickly how people are or how the team is feeling about Wendell. I would be shocked if Wendell plays against OKC. I think he's as sure as out. If he plays, then that means, it's a smaller thing. But when you see Wendell in tears on the bench tonight, I think that says everything you need to know, right? Like, could it just be a short-term moment of frustration, like that I can't play? Sure, it could be. Could it be an understanding that, hey, wow, I'm feeling the same things I felt last year? with his plantar fascia, and I know what that means, and that's what led to the emotions, that feels very likely. And so I think it's definitely possible that the Magic could already be on the phone looking for some sort of reinforcements there, because obviously the Mo thing's not working. Obviously, Goga is still questionable. He's questionable tonight. He's questionable for tomorrow's game. Well, today's game against OKC. So it feels like he's close to being back, but he's been questionable for 4 games now. So, it's like.
And going back to the injury, like if it's a foot tendon strain, like that's something that absolutely is something that you can re-aggravate.
Right.
And can be a nagging, reoccurring injury unless you just sit out long enough so that it's not an issue. And now, given the circumstances of where we're at, tomorrow, in my opinion, like if he's 50-50, you sit him. You don't put him out there in the hopes that you're going to be OKC with an undermanned roster and risk him re-aggravating that. You give him as much time as possible, and just moving forward, like talking about, upgrading over Wendell. Even Wendell healthy at this point, I do feel like is the next most maybe, other than moving a guy that's out of the rotation, if that's a Cole Anthony or ends up being a Gary Harris or something like that. Outside of making a move for like a guy that just isn't a fit here anymore. But in terms of like upgrading the rotation, to me, upgrading the starting center position is like the next move, right? Like you just added a shooting guard, you upgraded there with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope over Gary Harris. Everybody else is going to be locked into long-term extensions. And Wendell, even when healthy, does have his limitations. I don't think he's a perfect fit for this team. But if we're talking about having to move him to make some kind of upgrade, you're talking about starting, after next year, he's going to be making $18 million in 2026, 2027, and then 19 and a half in 2027, 2028. Now that third year in 28, 29, where he's making almost 21, that is a club option. But like, yeah, Wendell is going to be affordable for one more year, and then he's going to be making almost $20 million. And who knows if he's going to be able to play more than 60 games in a season. Like, that extension does not look good right now.
Yeah, that's the hard part. For those following along at home, some of you have already pulled up the NBA trade machine and stuff. Let me just go through the players that could be traded today. Okay, not saying it's going to happen, obviously, but again, there are so many players because of all the extensions and things that are restricted from being traded right now. Cole can be traded. Paolo can be traded if you want to do that. Anthony Black, Jet Howard, Tristan da Silva, Caleb Houston. Those are your players that can be traded right now. Now, some of these guys, their trade restriction gets lifted December 15th. Several of them, like a Corey Joseph, Gary Harris, I believe you had Gary Harris, Goga, and Mo. Those are the guys that their trade restriction gets lifted December 15th. That's a whole month away from now. But yeah, again, it's slim pickings, as far as who the Magic can deal. Does that mean a deal can't be done? No, I think a deal could be done because especially, the Magic have their draft picks. But yeah, it's ultimately going to be a question of this front office. Like, what do they value right now? Do they value the different things they've worked really hard on as far as flexibility and owning your draft picks and the culture within the team? Do they value those things and they're willing to suffer through these inevitable losses because of some of the holes on this team, namely at center? Or do they want to try to put together a team that can compete a little more this season and deal some of those things away? It's a philosophical question, one that I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, I come back to like this season not being about this season. So by no means like do I think you attach any type of significant draft capital or a young guy that you really believe in to make a move. Like I'm of the like, hey, go buy pretty low on somebody, whether that's somebody in the G League that you can give a two-way to, or if you're gonna trade a guy who is pretty much out of the rotation already. Like I don't even know if that means like you're going to move Cole Anthony. That feels like too much of a culture shift at this point in the season. But if you can, give up, I don't know, Caleb Houston and a second round pick or something like that, and go out and get a center. I don't know. Even that feels like it might be too much. I do think the answer is to just go out and get a high energy guy that's going to rebound and defend and can protect the rim a little bit with a two-way. You're the only team in the league that has a two-way open. Like, what are you waiting for other than like a break glass in case of emergency kind of move? Like it kind of feels like we're at now. Like Wendell and Goga have already been listed as questionable for tomorrow, like you said. Like Wendell's not playing tomorrow. He played 9 minutes tonight.
Right.
Couldn't move. To me, it's kind of crazy that he's even listed as questionable, but we're just going to have to wait and see. So, I mean, yeah, it's not great right now. It really is not. But the good news is, if there was a point, I don't want to say any point in the schedule because we do have tough stretches later on in the year. But if there was a point at this point in the year for this to happen, and for you to look really bad, it's in this stretch. Monday at OKC, then Wednesday you're at Indiana. You come back home on Friday. You've got New Orleans, Washington, Charlotte, Indiana. Even with everything that has happened, you have a 5-game stretch of winnable games. If you can figure out the offense a little bit and guys can start to knock down shots, like Indiana, New Orleans, Washington, Charlotte, Indiana, those are winnable games. And then, sure, you've got Philadelphia, Phoenix. You do have the Clippers. You have the Lakers. And then you've got Detroit, Charlotte, Chicago, Brooklyn. You can, potentially pick up a few more wins there as well. So, like over the next, 10 to 15 games, if you end up going, 6-9, 7-8, 8-7 in a stretch like that, at this point, I think most people would take that.
And I think the other thing that this is something that is going to help me sleep tonight, Jonathan. The Magic, things aren't going well and all that. They're still 6th in the Eastern Conference.
Right.
Like the Eastern Conference is a mess right now. It's early in the season. Teams are losing games they shouldn't. The worst 2 teams in the East right now are Philly and Milwaukee. They're 1-4 and 1-5 respectively. You got a team like Indiana who's 2-4. That's another team you expect to be competing with. Right now, Chicago is ahead of you. They're 500. They're 3-3. Miami, who you destroyed opening night, is 3-2. Right. So the whole East is just lopsided right now, which gives me a little bit of comfort because the Magic aren't alone. Obviously, they're alone in the fact that their best player is injured, and a lot of these teams aren't dealing with that. But the sky isn't totally falling. It's not like we're losing a ton of ground in the East and it's going to be insurmountable. But you're right. We got to get through these 2 road games, OKC and Indy. Try to get some mojo back home. And I think the biggest thing at this point for this team is just to make sure the morale stays high. As high as it can. I'm not saying high. That's a big ask. But like, don't get so defeated and so beat up over these performances and these losses that when Paolo does come back, you've mentally already buried yourself, right? Like that's the biggest thing for me, and that's going to be on Mosley and his crew to keep the spirits alive and keep the energy high and those things. And they're obviously they're gonna win. They're gonna win a game with Paolo out, right? It's just a matter of time. And when that happens, hopefully that can, kind of regain some of that momentum. And so that when Paolo does come back, this team is just ready to go on another rampage through the NBA.
I think that is not the only thing, because I think there are a lot of things that are going to keep this team from letting go of the rope. But one major thing that will stop them from doing that is we just have to hold on until Paolo gets back.
Right.
As long as we're within striking range of the playoffs, as long as you're within 4 or 5 games of the playoffs, by the time Paolo comes back, you're going to be just fine. At this point, if Paolo does end up missing 16 to 20 games, I'll gladly take the 6th seed in the East. Sign me right up for that. A 6-3 matchup, and you're going up against Philadelphia or Miami. Or not maybe Miami, maybe Milwaukee, any of those teams. I'll if you told me that was our matchup, at the beginning of the season, I'd say, yeah, sure, we'll take that. If it's not home court advantage, nobody thought that we're going to be missing Paolo for this amount of time. So to me, that is what these guys just have to remember. It's going to be rough for a little bit. I do think this is as bad as it's going to be, given the opponents that you're playing, the level of play. To me, we almost have to go back to the 2021 season where we were giving we were giving Jalen and Franz every opportunity, just go out there and play your game. Those guys have to be hyper aggressive. Those guys have to lead the way.
Yeah.
we need Franz to average over 20 a game, and we need Jalen to average pretty close to 20 a game. And then we need other guys like Kenny and Tristan and Gary and Jet and all those guys to knock down shots. And we need to defend at a high level, and we have to figure out the center position. If Goga isn't going to be back and he's going to be in and out of the lineup, if this foot thing becomes a real issue, they have to try to make some kind of move for that. The answer, if Goga isn't healthy, probably is for Mo to start, but you also need to have like an actual center that can give you 25 minutes a night. If one, I don't think JI is really a true center at this point, and he's also not going to be able to give you 25 minutes a night. So you've got to find somebody that can give that to you.
Yeah, 100% agree. Let the record show, like we said, difficult stretch. The Magic are one of 2 teams in the entire league that have already played 5 road games. The other 28, have played, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, one of 2 teams that have played 5 road games. So like a very difficult stretch. Gets way harder tonight against OKC. Quite literally the best team in basketball thus far by a wide margin on every statistical category. Like they've been blowing everybody out. That team's gonna be well rested because their best players aren't playing a lot of minutes because they're winning games by average of 17 points. It's gonna be tough. You're on the second night of a back-to-back. But once that's done, maybe, just maybe, this team can get some. And hey, maybe it starts tonight in OKC. I shouldn't keep dismissing it. It's the NBA, like we said. But that feels like a scheduled loss if we've ever had one in the history of this team.
You know what, though? I mean, we don't have Paolo, but last year, in Denver, nobody thought that was possible, especially after that, Sacramento game. You're like, lightning can't strike twice, in a few nights there. But all right, let's take a look at the week ahead. So we're looking at Monday at OKC. That game tips off at 9:15 Eastern. Wednesday at Indiana at 7 Eastern. Friday, back at home versus the New Orleans Pelicans. That game's at 7 o'clock. And then wrapping up the week Sunday at home versus the Wizards. That game tips off at 6 o'clock. Kevin, go ahead and go first on this.
I am going to say, they go 2-2, which feels so lofty.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say they go 2-2. Don't ask me what 2. I think you beat Washington. I'll give him that one.
Yeah.
They somehow are going to find a way to win one of the other 3. I don't know which one, but that's what I'm going to go with, 2-2.
I'm going 2-2. I'm going Washington, and I'm going at Indiana. I can't fathom a Jamal Mosley coach team just sort of like tucking their tail between their legs, going winless on a road trip and losing 5 games in a row. For some reason, that's just like a game where they just completely refuse to lose, and they go out and against all odds just kind of get it done. That's just the Coach Carter Hoosiers, fantasy in my mind, and how fitting would that be, against Indiana. But I'm going to go 2-2. I'm trying to be optimistic here. I think we've done a good job of balancing the reality, but also, not being super doom and gloom on this pod. So I'm proud of us for that. But yeah, 2-2 would be nice. And I think right now I've said about all I can say about the current affair of things. That's not true because I didn't do the State of the Magic at the beginning. Yeah. And it would just feel weird if I didn't do that at all. So we've talked about the games, what happened. But this week, the Magic went 1-4. They had a win over Indiana and then had losses to Chicago, Cleveland, and Dallas. At 3-4, the Magic are currently 6th in the Eastern Conference, rather. They're 4 games back of Cleveland, 3 games back of Boston, 1 game back of New York and Miami, half game back of Chicago. They are tied with Atlanta, Brooklyn, and Washington, but have tiebreakers because of their division record. They're a half game up on Indiana. The Magic are 25th in offensive rating, when a week ago, I believe they were 9th in offensive rating with a rating of 107.2. A week ago, they were 6th in defensive rating. Now they're 8th in defensive rating with a defensive rating of 108.5, and they're 18th in net rating with a negative 1.2. Taking a look at the injury report, the deal. Paolo Banchero is out with the torn oblique. He'll be reevaluated in mid-December. Goga has been out with the foot tendon strain. He's questionable for Monday night's game. Wendell Carter Jr. was questionable heading into Sunday's game with a right knee tendonitis. left Sunday's game with the left plantar fascia strain, and he is questionable for Monday's game in OKC as well. Kevin, one thing that I don't know that we talked about enough, and in sports psychology, they talk about giving yourself a compliment sandwich. So you start by giving yourself a compliment. You talk about some of the things that you need to improve on, and then you come back to the end and give yourself another compliment so that like overall you still feel, pretty good about yourself. This is going to be more of like a negativity sandwich, right? We talked about the injury with Paolo Banchero initially, right? And then we talked about like, more than likely he's coming back, somewhere in the next like 6 to 8 weeks. We didn't really talk a ton about the very real possibility, although it's maybe a relatively low possibility. If the tear does not heal on its own to the satisfaction of the Magic and the medical staff, there is still the possibility that this tear requires surgery and he could be out for the rest of the year.
All right, you all have been listening to Six Man Show. We'll catch you next time. Okay. Took my breath away. On our emergency podcast, Jonathan, I brought out the idea of him being out like 8 to 10 to 12 weeks, and you stopped me right there in my tracks.
Yeah.
That's even worse. How dare you?
That's way worse.
How dare
it's not
you?
Great. Yeah.
How dare that hadn't even crossed my mind. And I'm going to kick it out of my mind. I don't want to think about it
because like when they say like reevaluated, like basically like they're treating him for pain now, but like they're going to like redo all the scans and everything like that. And if they're like, yeah, the tear just is too significant that it's not going to heal on its own and they have to repair it with surgery, like I don't know that it would be like the entire season, but at that point it's like, what would be the point of bringing him back?
I would just like to go ahead and apologize to the viewers and listeners who have stuck around for the whole hour of this. And your reward is Jonathan is talking about Paolo being out for the entire season. So thank you so much. We appreciate all of you for, bro. I hadn't thought that had not crossed my mind. That's awful. I didn't. Yeah, you're right.
Somebody had brought that. Somebody said that on Twitter, like some doctor, that was like tweeting about the injury, and I was like, oh, yeah,
yikes. Okay, well.
That's going to do it for this one.
So here's I guess the silver lining of that is if that doesn't happen, then we're reminded it could have been worse. If he heals fine, we'll be grateful and we'll say it could have been worse. But wow, that's an awful way to end. This might be the worst ending to an episode in the history of our show. So
it's quite possible.
It's pretty bad. But yeah, thanks for that.
That's going to do it for this one. Now that I've ruined everyone's mood, for Kevin Tucker, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to the Six Man Show. You'll probably never come back, but we will catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!